and good evening. Hello and good evening. Hannes and Riccardo, are you here?
Hello.
Hello, good evening. Thanks so much, everyone out there in the digital space, for joining our talk today with Riccardo Giacconi and Hannes Obermair. Hannes, I think you are in Bolzano at the moment, and Riccardo, you're somewhere in Italy also, right?
Exactly.
Well, I'm here at the Kunstpavillon in Riccardo Giacconi's exhibition Options in Innsbruck. But my name is Petra Poelzl, and I'm the artistic and managing director of Kunstpavillon and Neue Galerie Innsbruck. And I'm honored and happy to be hosting and moderating this talk tonight with Riccardo and Hannes about the option agreement, from which in the talk we will depart from your exhibition Options here that is currently here on display in Innsbruck. But before we start, I just want to lose a couple of words about the broader context the exhibition and the talk are embedded in, because they are embedded in the annual program of Kunstpavillon and Neue Galerie Innsbruck of the years 21 and 22, which the program is entitled Dancing at the Edge of the World. It's a title that is alluding to the essay collection of the same name by the science fiction author Ursula Le Guin. And in this book, Dancing at the Edge of the World, the author, Ursula Le Guin, drafts alternative social fields of possibility that are not anchored in a colonial, patriarchal, or xenophobic narrative structure. Like, from my side of point of view, it's like an approach that seems more important than ever when living on this planet and in this current climate we are living in. Based on the Guin's thought, the program asks and will ask questions such as, how can our relationship with the environment be shaped responsibly? What ways of living together have proved or could prove to be beneficial? And how can a conscious approach towards the past and its vivid heritage succeed? Like, this is a couple of questions that we will treat throughout that year with the title Dancing at the Edge of the World. It's a very poetic title that I think fits also very well into our post-pandemic or pandemic times. The first two exhibitions of the cycle, namely Archives of Resistance and Repair, that is currently on display at Neue Galerie Innsbruck, and Options by Riccardo Giacconi, focus on these last questions that I also want to read now. How can a conscious approach towards the past and its vivid heritage succeed? The two exhibitions ask this question by scrutinizing prevalent knowledge regimes and recounting stories that are hardly considered in the powerful canons of history making, while the exhibition Archives of Resistance and Repair looks for possible ways of re-evaluating historical materials from a decolonial and anti-imperialist perspective. Riccardo Giacconi's Options develops references between the South Tyrolean resettlement implemented by Mussolini and Hitler and the current political climate in Europe. And this is also the exhibition which we will take a closer look at today. Having that said, I warmly welcome you again, Hannes and Riccardo. It's great having you here. Thanks so much for making this possible. I would suggest I will briefly introduce the both of you, and then we will start talking right away. About the structure also first, we planned on talking for around 40 to 45 minutes, and then we hope for a vivid discussion with the people who are online on Facebook and who are here in the Zoom webinar. So please note all the questions that might come up during the talk and get into a discussion with us later. So, Riccardo, first it's about you. Riccardo Giacconi has studied fine arts at the IUAV University of Venezia. His work has been exhibited in various institutions such as the Grazer Kunstvereins, AG Kunst in Bolzano, MIC in Belfast, Transit Display in Prague, or the 6th Moscow International Biennial for Young Art, just to mention a couple of them. Riccardo was an artist in residence at several institutions, such as the Centre International d'Art et du Paysage in France, Macri Museum of Contemporary Art of Rome, or at the Künstlerhaus Büchsenhausen here in Innsbruck. Riccardo presented his films at several festivals, including the New York Film Festival, the Venice International Film Festival, International Film Festival Rotterdam, Vision du Réel, and the Vite Marseille, where he won the Grand Prix of the international competition in 2015. He co-founded the Collective Listening Festival, Helico Trema, and the audio storytelling studio Botafuego. This is about you, Riccardo.
Thank you, Petra.
Thank you. And this is about now, I want to also introduce briefly Hannes Obermair, who is a historian, and he has a doctorate in history from the University of Innsbruck and is currently a senior researcher at the EURAC, European Academy of Bozen Bolzano. And his main areas of research are medieval studies, the regional history of fascism and Nazism, and public history. Hannes Obermair recently published and co-published a bunch of books, which I'm going to name 3 of them. Zeitgeschichte im Museum, das 20. und 21. Jahrhundert, Ausstellen und Vermitteln, Großdeutschland ruft, Südtiroler NS-Optionspropaganda und völkische Sozialisation und die Zeit dazwischen, Südtirol 1918 bis 1922, vom Ende des Weltkriegs bis zum faschistischen Regime. So, yeah, Hannes, you are really in the topic.
Thanks for having me on, and I'm very grateful and glad to join this initiative with both of you, of course.
We are also really happy to have you also because we will come to that point later, but you have also been like involved as a sparring partner or as somebody Riccardo has also been talking to in the course of developing this research-based project. So it makes sense to bring you in and like also to get a closer idea about how Riccardo created this exhibition, which is really, we will see it now or hear it now in the talk when preparing the exhibition with you, Riccardo. I was always amazed about how deep you were diving into the topic and how deep your research was going. So I also myself, I learned a lot about the option agreement and the whole situation around it. Yeah, then Riccardo. Our talk tonight, as you already said, departs from the research-based body of work entitled Options. What is also important to say is that it was originally conceived for Steirischer Herbst 2019, and it was on display in the course of Steirischer Herbst 2019 at the Grazer Kunstvereins. What you see behind me is one of the posters of a series of posters, which is entitled Dingierung, in which you borrow, deconstruct, and fracture existing elements and grammar of heraldic designs. The color palette is mainly black, white, and orange. The symbols resemble fascist and Nazi propaganda materials, but on the other hand, they also get like twisted in a kind of comic or comedian kind of way. In this series of posters, the eagle is quite a present symbol or figure that reappears in this series of posters, which I also find very interesting because I'm not Tyrolean, and this eagle is very strong here. When you walk on the street, it's like everywhere. Yeah, and so somehow this series of posters also makes up a kind of reference to the populism of current times, maybe you want to talk a little bit about your how you worked with heraldic symbols, because also Wappenrolle, another work that you're showing at the entrance here. I want to share my screen. Oh, plays with this kind of heraldic language.
Yes, absolutely. So heraldry was really one of the starting points when I conceived this project. Basically, just to say a few words about what the project is tackling. As you said, it's based on a research. I started researching about the option agreement and started researching in Tyrol, North and South Tyrol, from an outside point of view, because I'm not from Tyrol and I'm from the center of Italy, and the story of the option, I didn't know anything about it until I came to Tyrol. So it's all, I always took the position of the outsider somehow, or as we say in Italy, of the forestiero. So basically from 1939 to 1943, the German-speaking but also Ladin-speaking people of South Tyrol were given the opportunity, the option to remain in fascist Italy, but in that case to be integrated into the mainstream Italian culture and losing their language and their cultural heritage, or they had the option to emigrate to the neighboring Reich, so basically Nazi Austria or other Reich's territories. So this system was enforced after an agreement between Mussolini and Hitler that was called the option agreement, which I was always surprised by this nomenclature, because option somehow always seems like a sort of an ironic term, because the two options anyway were really bad, were really terrible. You were asked to choose between your land or your culture, basically. And I was interested in taking the South Tyrolean territory and the frontier, the border between Italy and Austria as a case study, because this project is questions somehow ideas such as borders, identity, language, communities, and this word, this concept that is present everywhere in Tyrol, the concept of Heimat, as well as minority, migration. And I think that the option agreement and its aftermath may serve as a case study, if you want, as a paradigm, how these ideas are manipulated, instrumentalized, and even fictionalized by powers. So yes, starting from there, I decided to work with heraldry, because as you said, Petra, yes, the Adler, the eagle, is present everywhere in Tyrol, in South Tyrol, but also in Trentino. So it's on the coat of arms of three lands. And I mean, I am very interested in heraldry, because heraldry is a language that is intrinsically identitarian. So it deals with identity, but it's also, if you want, conflictive and relational, because it deals with who we are as a group that define ourselves through that symbol, that image. And a wappen, a coat of arms, also define what we are not. So in that sense, I think it's inherently relational and conflictive. So basically, these posters that you're talking about, the posters are called Tingierung. It's a German word, and it's a word from the heraldic terminology. They are 7 posters that were printed in Colombia using a 19th century letterpress machine. And these posters basically display a series of coats of arms, or bits and pieces of coats of arms. So basically they are visual and textual elements of potential heraldry based on the design of propaganda materials from the option agreement time. So basically Nazi propaganda materials, but also fascist propaganda materials, but also socialist propaganda materials from the time. So basically I extrapolated some visual and textual elements in order to create this sort of parodies of posters. So I always like to say that these posters are mimicking the tone of calls to a local population, but they are actually, they don't have any, they don't share any specific political ideology more than that, they don't convey any specific message. So basically, they are clues of a political vibration that is totally unlocated and totally void, if you want. That's why I like to call them parodies. And then for what regards the other work that you were mentioning, the curtain, I called it Wappenrolle, so a roll of arms, this device that in heraldry history was conceived to showcase different coats of arms. And basically, I wanted to play with that as well. This is an index, if you want, of heraldic symbols that I collected and that I adapted in a sort of visual lexicon. So some of those coats of arms come from actual coats of arms from Tyrolean places, cities mainly. Some others were used in propaganda materials, and some of them are visual reelaborations of such visual materials. I wanted to present this Wappenrolle, this coat of arms, in material that is very, very folkloric, if you want. It's very everyday. This is a plastic beads of beads and pieces of plastic that are used in Italy, especially South and Central Italy, in front of shop windows when during the summer, so not to let flies and other insects come in. So it's very vernacular language, and I wanted to mix these two language, one that is very serious regarding heraldry and the other one very vernacular. And this is an introduction to the exhibition, if you want, because it's at the beginning, but it's also connected to a blazon, to a list of 21 short stories that are distributed to the audience in a booklet. And those short stories, each of them is connected to one of the coat of arms. So this is a work that you can also read with this sort of text, with this legenda. And this blazon, these 21 short stories, somehow they are fragmentary chronology of events. Some of them are big events, some of them are very minor events, but that somehow shaped my research into South Tyrolean history and to contemporary situation.
Thank you. I just want to add one short question about the work Tingierung that you spoke about first. I would like to ask you about the color palette briefly, why you use this orange, black and white.
Right, because while I was studying the codes of heraldry, colors are very important, of course, and colors are divided into two categories. So you have colors and you have metals. So metals is basically yellow and white, which would be gold and silver. And then you have other colors such as blue, red, green. So those colors and metals should never be mixed in classic heraldry. That is why the color orange, which is between red and yellow, so between a color and a metal in heraldic terminology, was not really used in heraldry, and in English terminology it was called a stain. So basically it was called a mistake. It was called a color not to be used in heraldry, and that is why I decided to use exactly that color. Also because in the Tyrolean history, orange was historically not really used for propaganda materials.
Thank you, Riccardo. And now to you, Hannes, I have a question for you. It's you have also been you know Riccardo throughout the research-based project, as I just said it in the beginning, but you're also in the exhibition Großdeutschland ruft. You were also exhibiting part of the Tingierung, part of the poster series in another way. And there's also, I want to go back in time a little bit. When we spoke, you said that, as we all know, that the history of the option, for a long time, got not really discussed. It was kind of swept under the carpet. And I think 1989 was the moment where a public discourse started to happen. And that was one thing was throughout that exhibition in Bolzano that was entitled Option Heimat Optioni. Could you talk a little bit about that? what happened there in 1989 and also about that specific exhibition.
Yeah, that was a very groundbreaking exhibition in order to give to a whole generation the possibility to speak out, older and younger people, and addressing this so tricky argument, which has been disclosed for decades, and but also served in the end always as some sort of victimization narrative, so important to always to politics, and therefore it has been abused. So this exhibition from 1989 had, I would compare it possibly to the Wehrmachtsausstellung or to the Waldheim affair in the former in Germany, the latter, of course, in Austria, both in the 80s. So they were some sort of taboo-bruch, and allowed finally, lately, but finally, to speak publicly about this original sin, which the options were in some way, because the options, the option, at least to me as a historian, is some sort of the epitome of the racist dream, but also of the racist folly. It represents perfectly that totalitarian mood of the first half of the 20th century, forcing whole groups of population to resettle in order to follow a dream, a nationalist, a racist dream, and therefore, and I would like to come back here to Riccardo's artwork. It is so strong to me, and in my understanding, it resonates. All those patronizing meanings, the original meanings, but subverting them. So to me, it's sort of communication guerrilla at its best, because it creates its perturbation. Of course, it is shifting our perception, and even those, as you so aptly said before, Riccardo, those intelligent mistakes inside your work are in some way allowing us to gain a new perspective on this derailment of a whole society. Therefore, here we have two approaches coming together: the artistic one and the historical one, and that's the fascination which, at least to me, or as I see also for the Tiroler Kunstpavillon, emanates from Riccardo's work.
In Graz, I want to add something here. In Graz, you also had the possibility to have this poster that we see behind me. It was on this newspaper, the Grazer. I think it's a weekly newspaper or a monthly newspaper that is for free, gratis, delivered to each household in Graz. And that was on the cover, that poster, you know, like with the Ja and the Eagle. So I think it might have also been kind of a little bit confusing for people to get this weekly newspaper with that cover on it. So
that's communication guerrilla.
Exactly.
That's communication guerrilla. And also, you must bear in mind that there's today a large South Tyrolean group, also in Graz, as in Innsbruck, originating from the South Tyrolean option. But of course now this project of yours is addressing the whole society, and yeah.
I also wanted to add something about the Adler, the eagle, because first of all, I was very interested in the fact that somewhere I read, according to a theory, that the eagle as a heraldic symbol actually comes from the Middle East. So it's not inherently related to Tyrol or to the German-speaking world or to Trentino. But and as every element in heraldry, it can be used in many different ways. And also, Hannes, a very important figure for me that I encountered in my research is Norbert Kasser, so the South Tyrolean poet, and he wrote a poem, a short poem that's very ironic, and at the same time is like an attack to the conventionalism. There is a poem that makes fun of the Tyrolean eagle. That is also another of the posters of the exhibition.
Claiming for the killing of the eagle, literally in his very iconic poem, which he read also in Innsbruck, I guess in the early 60s. Yeah, that was a very courageous act, and led to a lot of attacks against Norbert Konrad Kasser, of course, who was some sort of prominent outcast, especially within the South Tyrolean society of that period.
I was just looking if I have the poster here on the computer, but now I couldn't find it that fast. Yeah, do you know what's written again on the poster? Do you know it? Can you repeat?
Basically, it ends. Hannes, correct me if I'm wrong. It ends with something like, let's pluck the Tyrolean eagle like a chicken, something like that, which is like sort of a heresy, no? If you want.
I just found it. Can you see it? That's what we are referring to, right?
Right, and here,
I
yes.
guess if I remember correctly, he's speaking of a sort of Schlachtfest, of a butchery of the Tyrolean eagle, and of course of all which it stands for, the literature of its period, very deep rooted within the folkish thinking still in the 60s, especially in South Tyrol, but also in the northern Tyrol province, and so it was 68 of Tyrolean kind.
Okay, let's go back to the exhibition again. Can you hear me? Yeah. As we just spoke about the 1989 exhibition, which had the title Option, Heimat, Optioni. Riccardo, you chose the title that is options, like also to keep that kind of neutral position as an artist, right? You didn't make decision for a German or an Italian title. You used the English title, I guess, to keep the neutral position, right?
Yeah, I mean, neutrality is impossible, but I didn't want to choose between the three languages.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. But now I want to go into the work option that is behind that wall, and to make also like kind of clear how deep you were diving into the topic, and how maybe you can describe with that work, which is an installation that consists of 3 wooden puppets, as you call them, and of a 40 minutes audio installation. So maybe we can look at this work and you explain a little bit how you created it and how you worked on it.
Yes. So basically, this is, I consider it the main installation in this project. And it's composed of 2 parts. As you said, there are, in the Innsbruck iteration, there are 3 puppets. And I consider the whole installation a puppet play. So these 3 puppets are wooden. 2 of them were built by Colombian sculptor Erling Ferla, and 1 of them was built by an Italian very ancient puppet company, the Carlo Colle e Figli puppet company. These are built with wood from Tyrolean woods, forests. And in the room, which is a rather dark room, you have 5 sound sources, and each of them is connected to a voice. So basically, it's a sound piece for these puppets. And the sounds, basically, the audio track is composed of different voices, 6 different voices. And basically, it's an archival research, because the audio track is composed of a dramaturgy of excerpts from letters. Those letters were written to and from South Tyrol in the years between 1939 and 1943. And before being delivered, those letters were opened and translated into Italian by the fascist Minister of the Interior. So basically, they were written in German, and the Italian state, they wanted to have a look of the situation in South Tyrol in those crucial years. And so they opened a lot of those letters and translated them into Italian. So those translations were collected in the archives of the Italian state. There's a very beautiful book that was published in Bolzano that is called Le opzioni rilette, so the options reread. And it's a retranslation and a comment on some of those letters, and it's been produced by the cultural association La Fabbrica del Tempo. And this is a very important reference for me. So basically, those letters, I created a dramaturgy starting from those letters. And I asked a series of South Tyrolean people to retranslate them into German. So basically, those are the voices of this sort of radio / puppet play. I asked some people to retranslate, to give voice to these letters, but these people are not actors. I decided to work with people that are connected to this history somehow. So let me make a couple of examples. One of them is Albert Mair. So he is a prominent composer based in Florence, but he's also the son of Joseph Mair-Nusser, one of the people who resisted, one of the symbols of South Tyrolean resistance. Albert Mair gave the voice to one of the characters in this installation. Another person who gave voice to this character, to another character, is Eva Klotz, so an iconic figure in South Tyrolean politics. And then 2 journalists, Renate Mumelter, German-speaking, and Jaco Rigo, Ladin-speaking. And then an artist, Hannes Egger, and Hannes Obermair also gave a voice to one of these characters in this installation. So that is basically how it works. As you said, Petra, it's a 40-minute long installation, and the audience is invited to spend time with these voices coming from the past, but in which all the references to dates and locations and names are left out of the dramaturgy, so that somehow it is sort of an ambiguous piece, because it can also be talking about another period of time. Even it might be referring to today's situation.
May I add something here, because I have been thankfully involved in the project then, and we had to translate those translated letters, because they were translated from the former German originals into Italian, and the originals have been destroyed in some way. Only the Italian translations done by the secret services survive, and we had to translate them from scratch. So Riccardo presented us a text, an Italian text, and we had to translate it here and now, and that was very intriguing, because when doing so, you're completely immersed, embedded in those feelings, which don't, of course, belong to you, but you immediately notice that those feelings are feelings from people heard, and you are in that moment dealing with their legacy in some way, and it was very moving to me to do it, and I tried to remain very attentive and very sensitive to the topic, and was always fearing that I would retranslate it in a wrong way, and doing injustice to those people. So it was very touching to me, this experience.
It is very touching. Also, when you're in that space with the puppets, listening to the spoken text, to the translations, it's it's kind of relieving, but also kind of getting very narrow. So we also prepared one piece of 2 minutes, which we can like play now, right? So people who have not been in the exhibition get an idea about the audio.
Am 23. April um 12:30 haben wir am Himmel eine große, feine Wolke in Kreuzesform gesehen. Das Kreuz blieb sichtbar fast eine Stunde und alle haben es bewundert. Solche Himmelserscheinungen gibt es wirklich nur in unserem Land, über Grenzorten. Die Leute überlegen, was das bedeuten könnte.
Heute habt ihr bereits die Kriegserklärung gehört. Also ab morgen werden wir im Krieg sein. Wir mögen nicht diese hochstehenden Wörter, aber die Tatsachen. Wir kämpfen für die Freiheit. Leider finden sich überall Parasiten. Aber wir werden sie in der neuen Heimat alle ausschalten, festhalten.
Die neuen Ideen, von denen man so viel spricht, sie schmecken nach altem Wein in neuen Schläuchen. Die Magie führt und verführt die unerfahrenen Gemüter.
Yes, so basically, as Hannes was saying, I didn't want to use actors because for me it was very important to have a voice that is searching for the right word. The right word, of course, is nowhere to be found because, as Hannes says, most of those letters were destroyed. So we don't have the original. But to me, it was important to have those pauses, those moments of reflection. And in this excerpt, you've heard, for example, 3 different voices: the voice of Eva Klotz, the voice of Hannes Egger, and the voice of Albert Meyer.
Thank you. But after the World War II was kind of over, this whole linguistic problem or this whole situation did not really change a lot, right? I mean, as far as I know, for example, for job applications, Italian language and Italian applicants were preferred when public positions were awarded. So hence the crack in society in South Tyrol was not resolved with the end of World War II. Maybe Hannes, you can talk a little bit about the years after the World War II and how the situation kept on going in South Tyrol.
Yeah, maybe very briefly, this ethno-nationalist struggle and conflict went on for decades, and you know, there has been this Paris Treaty of 1946, which annexed to the international agreement ending the World War II. So with an international reputation, granting autonomy to the German and Latin-speaking population, which then hasn't in the upcoming years fulfilled. And by the Italian state, this was some sort of giving a large autonomy, but denying the return of South Tyrol to Austria. to the Austrian Republic, and also dealing with a large number of people trying to reclaiming their citizenship, which they have lost due to the option, and in all this mess, Italian government went on for a certain period of time in not granting this devolution, and this led to, on the one side, a fervent diplomatic attempt, both by the South Tyrolean elite, the politicians of the South Tyrolean Volkspartei especially, but also the Austrian state and the Italian state, bringing the topic even to the before the United Nations, where, for example, Kreisky was very important in claiming for a solution of this minority conflict. But on the other hand, there has been a separatist movement and a terrorist movement too, which planned a lot of more than, in the end, hundreds of terrorist attacks from 1956 onwards. Sort of high time was the so-called Feuernacht, the night of fire of 1961. But this went on up to the last bomb, and I remember it vividly, exploded in Bolzano in 1988. So more and more it became a neo-Nazi infiltrated movement, and was in the end very successfully counteracted by politics, leading to the second statute, to the Autonomie Statute of 1972, which opened a new chapter of development and welfare too, because when it's very patently you see it today in South Tyrol, which what autonomy means in that sense. So we have those two conflicting lines between an ethno-nationalist resurgence all over the 20th century and a very successful political dealing with it. In the end, not making out of South Tyrol a second Northern Ireland, for example, which would have been certainly for a short period of time a very dark possibility here. Yeah, that's it.
But sometimes your connection is a little bit bad, I have to admit.
Oh,
I don't know how you feel, Riccardo.
I hear Hannes very well.
Okay,
yeah.
Because now he was, for a short moment, he was gone. But thanks for elaborating on this. You want to add something, Riccardo, about the Bombenjahre and the Feuernacht?
It's a topic, it's a topic as complex as the option agreement.
Yeah.
So when I was working, I also, the last thing I did about this project is a radio documentary for the Italian radio, and I divided it into 5-6 different chapters. So one chapter was the option agreement, and one whole chapter, of course, it was the Bombenjahre. And it's, I would not like to say anything in a hurry, because it's something that, it's a very, very complex and multi-layered topic. What I would like to say maybe is that this research that I did, I think I was very lucky to meet people such as Hannes and a lot of historians and journalists and writers and artists. And yes, basically I would like to thank them, because it's thanks to them that myself as a forestiero, as a foreigner, as an outsider, I developed sort of an obsession with South Tyrol. Since it's so complex and so multi-layered, I cannot stop but studying it and meeting people and talking about it with people. And this has started 3 years ago, and it's still going on.
But it also started in the course of a fellowship, where you've been in the fellowship program of Büchsenhausen here in Innsbruck in 2018, right? And that
Yes.
is also where you started to work on it, right? If I understood that right, or
yes, because during the fellowship at Büchsenhausen, I received this invitation from steirischer Herbst and Grazer Kunstverein, and since I was already in Innsbruck, I started visiting the Landesarchiv and the Stadtarchiv, two very important places for me and for this research. And I especially in the Landesarchiv that collects also a lot of documents from South Tyrol, I encountered a lot of materials, and among them I encountered a set of postcards, of propaganda postcards, that are also included in the exhibition, that I found out Hannes Obermair gave to the library. These are, yes, these postcards. These were one of the first items that I've encountered in my research.
yeah, and they are now part, just here in the exhibition in the room, in archive boxes or in glass boxes. And I also want to thank at this part the Landesarchiv, the Tiroler Landesarchiv and the Stadtarchiv for loaning us these works. But now I give the word to you again, Hannes. Like, it's so interesting how Riccardo, I like the way of how Riccardo finds his way to the option, and then he finds the postcards that you donated to the Landesarchiv.
Yeah.
So maybe you can explain a bit, what do we see on these postcards and how come you had them?
Yeah, he's connecting a lot of loose ends, and because those postcards, I think I have been donating them in 1989 in the context of the Option exhibition then, where I took part of that initiative, to the Landesarchiv. I think they are sketched by Heinrich Schwendt, which is a South Tyrolian artist and a member of the Nazi Party too. And after World War II, he was a very prominent artist too. So he didn't suffer any consequences from his huge involvement in the Nazi movement. But 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to prepare a big exhibition at the Tyrol Castle, again, the Tyrol Castle near Merano, on a great deal of South Tyrolean, also Northern Tyrolean, but mainly South Tyrolean artists like Heinrich Schwendt or the Stolz brothers, who are worked or were sympathetic both to the fascist regime and to the Nazi regime. So we had to come to the conclusion that a whole generation has been completely keen to support the totalitarian project, and there was no resistance at all. And after 45, this hasn't been debated by anyone. On the contrary, maybe this has been some sort of unspoken element of reliability of them within the new context. So they were some sort of ethnic testimonies to the post-war cultural agenda, and they didn't have to deny nothing unless you wouldn't speak of it. So that's the conclusion I gathered from that experience. Yeah. And thanks to Riccardo, 2 years later we did a second, or I did a second exhibition there on Nazi propaganda posters from the option period again, which have been discovered only 2 years ago. This is from the Volkshilfswerk, but the other ones are from the ADO, which is the Arbeitsgemeinschaft der Optanten, the Nazi organization dealing with the option, with the transfer of the population, and we discovered a lot of propaganda material which is very obscene. People saluting the mountains, the Rosengarten, the Schlern, with the swastika sun rising or settling, and showing perfectly this national, this ethnic racist dream. And so option to me is always linked to this wider program of reducing or destroying any individuality towards a collective dream of one people, one leader, one nation, and the pictures we are seeing here are perfectly displaying this aberration of human mind.
Yeah, but there were so many of these propaganda postcards, motifs, and posters, right? I mean, just when we talk about it, it's always appearing, and also in the in the publication that you did, Riccardo, right, which is here, and which was published by the publishing house Rohrhof in Bolzano. You also play again with that heraldic symbols, and also with that format of like big. With the format, it also kind of not really postcards, but it's like this kind of shuffling idea,
like tarot cards, if you want.
Exactly. Yes. And on the back, you always have this kind of stories. Like it's a very playful. So I just get a note from the technician. Oh, okay, I should stop sharing my screen. Thank you. It's a very playful approach to dive into the history of South Tyrol and the option, because it's like really this kind of adventure game, this publication. Imagine you find yourself in Bolzano, a friend tells you about the option, but you never heard about it. And then it kind of explains in a very playful way events and ideas. Also, like it discusses people that were important or that were involved in the option. And so it was also like the name Alex Langer comes up very often in these cards, who died in 1995. And as far as I know, Langer is more well known in Italy than he is in German-speaking contexts or countries. Could you both, or Hannes, I don't know, maybe introduce him to us and talk a bit about his influence on the contemporary situation in South Tyrol with regards to the coexistence of linguistic groups?
Yeah, very shortly, maybe, so we can also then open up to discussion. But Alex Langer was the peace activist in South Tyrol. He was a member of the provincial parliament, but also of the European Parliament, founder of the New Left, and then of the Green Party, and always conflicting the official politics of dividing the population into ethnic groups. Maybe one, he wrote those witty and but also profound 10 Punkte fürs Zusammenleben, 10 points for living together. And there's one I would like to, which are claiming for multiculturalism and respect of otherness, of course. But he then has this wonderful, there's a wonderful quote. He speaks of Verräter der ethnischen Geschlossenheit. So he says this society, to be a more mature society, civil society, is in need of traitors, of course, within quotation marks, of traitors of this ethnic closeness, of this ethnic group thinking, but not of defectors, of course. So you have to jump those lines and to see always the other perspective, or to claim the otherness as some sort of more just perspective for yourself. That's his great legacy, and I think he is just a wonderful politician, or was a wonderful politician and author and writer, and I knew him personally, because once when I tried to stop a car to come to Bolzano from Innsbruck, he took me up with this small panda in the late 80s. I will never forget that.
We also have this book of his, like in the library, Aufsätze zu Südtirol 1978 bis 1995. So we bought it like it's from it's secondhand, so it has this stain here. But if you come to see the exhibition, you can also have a look, and on the back of the book I just see it's written, seid nicht traurig, macht weiter, was gut war. And so
his very sad last, but also inspiring last words.
Yeah. This was his?
Yeah.
Okay.
He left them on a paper near his dead body. Mm-hmm. So it's his really his final words.
Mm. And when I flipped through that book, there's also some pictures of public events he did, of demonstrations he joined, where he gave speeches and stuff. So maybe as a last question, I also want to go to the public place and to the memoriam of the option as a public collective event. And they're like, I want to first start with the work of Riccardo Merkblatt, in which you use the 10 Gebote für Umsiedler, the 10, what's it called, commandments for resettlers, and kind of deconstructed it for a performance that was taking place in Graz in a public space. Here in Innsbruck, we show it in the basement. I just want to show it. And it's basically like an audio. Here you see also the publication again, how it's presented in the exhibition. But like in this setting, we are presenting the audio file as a trace of the performance. So maybe you can talk a bit about that work, and then I want to go for a last question to Hannes, and then we can open for questions for the audience.
Yes. So basically what we presented in Innsbruck is a documentation of this performance that took place in Graz during Steirischer Herbst 2019. I took the inspiration from this leaflet, this Merkblatt, that was called 10 Gebote für Umsiedler, so 10 commandments for the people for resettlers, for the people who decided to opt out and they were looking for their new homes, basically. Those are very practical commandments. So there are instructions as what to bring when you are doing this journey. Very, very practical. What we did with South Tyrolean poet Katia Renzler, whom I've met in Bolzano, in Innsbruck. With her, we worked on this sort of textual deconstruction of these 10 commandments. And so during this textual deconstruction, the sentences are progressively shuffled, words are altered, and the commandments revealed this increasingly ambiguous, absurd, and even violent character. So this text that we developed with poet Katia Renzler was then performed, shouted by a 13-year-old girl in Graz. So she was a wonderful performer, because in public space she was shouting these commandments that became more and more absurd. And there were no references to places and locations and dates. So once again, once they were out in the public space, passers-by could really interact with them however they wanted. So for some of them, this looked like sort of a political reivindication, but at the same time, it was a very young girl, so it didn't really match. And so some people stayed, and this was like sort of once again, as Hannes said, reshuffling pieces of propaganda and bringing them out again to see how they resonate and how the same or similar categories take place in political and public spaces.
Mm-hmm. When we spoke the other day, Hannes, you also mentioned that you have been involved in some public interventions in Bolzano around the topic of the option. Can you maybe briefly speak about one of them? Because I thought that was really interesting, and how the public remembrance or the collective remembrance kind of does not really exist on that topic. I've kind of figured it out now. So I would like to have this.
There are two of them. One is at Castel Tirol, the Turm der Erinnerungen, the Tower of Remembrances, of Memories, which is in the shell tower of the Castel Tirol, is displaying a lot of material about the option, and also giving the historical context of the time, the period, from a very neutral point of view, and very well done in my view. And then is that other one, a more recent one, within the Monument to Victory, the Fascist Monument Victory, at the center of Bozen, Bolzano, near the Talfa Bridge, where I got the opportunity in 2014 to be part of a historical group commission to prepare that permanent exhibition called BZ 1845, One Monument, One City, Two Dictatorships, and trying to create a new narrative of South Tyrolean history within the context of course, of more global aspects, but dealing especially with the fascist and the Nazi experience, and addressing very directly also the option as a shifting period, and trying to also with oral history documents to give voice to the period from a point of view which makes clear that there's a huge gray zone. So the gray zone is dominating to me, and there's no black and white. There's more a gray zone of victims becoming perpetrators, and perpetrators becoming victims. So there's and that makes that period so vivid. So the Monument to Victory to me is thus some sort of justice to the period, and telling the whole story, which is addressing sensibilities and of all ethnic groups, and but also attracting new migrants, and explaining to them what the history of this region is about in some way.
Mhm.
Of course, I'm a bit biased here because I was part of the team, but in the end, it has led to some sort of calming down of the row about the monument itself and all which it represents in a sort of reframing of fascism into a counter monument. The same we did then in the Tribune Square with adding this Hannah Arendt quote on Mussolini himself.
Which was the Hannah Arendt quote again? Which quote did you use for Hannah Arendt?
No one has the right to obey, and this is covering the Italian Duce saluting the Roman, doing the Roman salute and giving his 10 commandments to his society. So he hasn't the last word there. But civil society has, and Hannah Arendt has, the great Hannah Arendt has.
Yeah. No one has the right to obey. Thank you so much, both of you. So maybe I can ask if somebody on Facebook or on Zoom has a question for Riccardo or Hannes. If you want to pose a question, I think you just have to, what do people have to do? You have to go to the chat. Was? Das jetzt? Okay. Are there no questions from the audience? Then I speak a little bit more. I'm happy to tell you that we will reopen the exhibition options on Wednesday at 12 o'clock because the lockdown in Austria is finally over. And so warmly welcome to see the exhibition. And yeah, no question on Facebook, no questions on Zoom. Then, Riccardo, Hannes, do you want to say something?
Oh, I'm fine with that. Maybe it's also the language. Maybe we have been choosing English, but the questions could also be posed by in German, I guess, or in Italian, of course. But no problem at all. I think the exhibition speaks for herself in some way, and hopefully it will attract a lot of visitors.
Yes, I'm like, I think the exhibition attracts like really many people, and people who do not necessarily come from an art background. So I realized that the topic really needs to be discussed. People are really, really interested in seeing and hearing and speaking about that topic. That's why I'm a little bit surprised that nobody's asking a question. But yeah.
Maybe we were boring. No, I hope we didn't.
So, Riccardo, you want to say something for the end? Because otherwise we can also close it and call it a night.
Yes, I would just like to thank you, Petra, and thank Hannes for taking part. Me, it's really wonderful that Hannes was here because he was really one of the first people I encountered, and he was a constant presence throughout this process. So yes, thank you, Hannes, once again.
Yeah, thank you, Hannes.
Thank you, Riccardo, of course, and then Petra, especially for having me invited to join this nice project. And yeah, all the best for the initiative, and for further developments.
Thank you so much. And yeah, we will speak again soon.
Thank you, Petra.
Thank you, Riccardo. Thank you, Hannes. Bye-bye.
Thanks, bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.